Namaste, everyone. This is Maria Turco, and welcome to the Honor Yoga Foundation TripleCast. And I am here today with Heather O'Neill, another powerhouse woman creating and making change in the world and inspiring women everywhere, which I absolutely love. Spent a few minutes getting to know Heather, and she is the epitome of altruism and really what I like to refer to as flow. And I don't mean yoga flow. I mean life flow, and really understanding your dharma as a person and how you can create change in the world. And that's what our TripleCast is really all about. So without further ado, welcome, Heather.
Hi, thanks, Maria. I'm so happy to be here with you today from Morocco.
From Morocco. I was just going to say that. So for our listeners who are listening to us on audio and not video, Heather is wearing this amazing, bright yellow, beautiful sweater with this amazing jewelry, and she is full of light and color. Yes, and her earrings, because everything is colorful in Morocco. You mentioned that before, Heather, how everything is just so beautiful color. I'm just wondering why. Why is that? Do you know the secret to that and why everything is just so colorful and beautiful in Morocco?
I think it's like a California, Mediterranean climate. So the sun is always shining. Honestly, I feel like I found home when I got to Morocco. The sky is like blue even in January. So I really, it's hard to argue with that. And I think Morocco has such a rich artisan culture. They live in color. They really do. It's a very vibrant culture. Even the food is very colorful. So it's something about the culture. And I always say that Morocco calls certain people, like it attracts artists and filmmakers. There's a big film studio in Ouarzazate. It really is a magical country. I encourage everyone to come visit when you get a chance, when borders aren't closed. So right now, Morocco has held me captive for the moment, but we'll get through that.
Okay, so you were born in the U.S., so you'll have to tell everyone, and I'm curious to hear, your story. What inspired you to go down the path that you are now, and how did you make that transition from the U.S. to Morocco? When did it all start?
So, just a bit of background. I have a design degree, and I was working in New York, and I always wanted to join the Peace Corps. I just felt this calling to go serve in a developing country. And I remember at the time my boss thought I was crazy. I basically said, I'm going to quit my design job. I'm on this career, to be in the design world in New York. And I said, I'm going to join the Peace Corps. And I went to their office and applied. And I didn't really know what I was going to do for the Peace Corps. I thought I could teach English or whatever they needed. And it turned out there was this a small business development program for artisans in Morocco. And man, that was just like a dream position for me, for someone with my background and for wanting to serve and help women in the developing world. So that was my intro. So Morocco sort of called me, and then really it was the first weekend I arrived in Rabat. And I don't know if you've had an aha moment. I'm sure you've had many, Maria, too, in your life, of I'm supposed to be here kind of moment. And I really felt that from the very first weekend. So that was almost 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
There have been a lot of paths since then, but I ended up back here. So I served as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. I worked on women's development in a very rural area. And after I finished that, I came back to New York. I got a master's at NYU in business. But my passion was to start a business to help women after having seen the way they sold in local souks. Women had no bargaining power. And this was sort of the beginning of the internet, beginning of Facebook, beginning of social media. So none of those channels existed to help women connect with the Western market. So my sister and I had an aha moment together. She's also a designer. And we thought we have to start a business to help connect rural women to the market. So that was, I finished in 2005. We started the business Mushmina in 2009. So my introduction was the Peace Corps, and I'm really grateful. They still help me. All my friends and colleagues and contacts, many have now become diplomats. They're all over the world. And I have to say, it was a life-changing decision to leave that job in New York and sort of jump ship, not like I always say, leap and the net appears. I really didn't know what that was going to result in, but I just had this feeling like I was supposed to do that. So
yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Oh my goodness. It so answers, the question. And kudos to you for being a woman leader and helping women. I just got back from Strategic Growth Forum. I was a Ernst & Young Winning Woman of the Year in 2021. And, and so I learned that, women get less than 2% of VC funding out there. And that, women of minority and of color get less than 1%. And so, women, you mentioned, how, women had no bargaining power there in Morocco. And so, I'm really kind of curious, like, since you started this years ago, have you seen a change and have you seen an impact? Like, how do you feel about, today versus 20 years ago, women in
honestly, I think the internet has changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
Artisans are now selling off Instagram, and think about, I'm talking 90% of the women I work with are illiterate, so they have very minimal education, sometimes just up till third grade. It's very much a rural development, so they don't have necessarily the skills to sell and to like export and to ship and to handle all that paperwork. But the internet has changed everything. I mean, artisans have their own Instagram accounts. Our lead weaver has her own Instagram account. So, it's like access. It's the social media is providing access to customers that didn't exist before. So what my sister and I sought out to do in 2009 was create this connection. So now we're seeing, there are other avenues for artisans to sell. So I encourage them, they work with me, they sell through Mushmina, but they should also have their own Instagram accounts. A lot of these women are part of cooperatives, so they can have their own entities. So part of my mission also is like mentoring and coaching. So I feel like this year in year 12, I've sort of stepped into more of that, being a coach and a mentor to help get women to be their own business leaders, so empowering them to take those steps themselves.
I love that. I love how you have an abundance mentality, right? And you're not like hoarding their talent for yourself and for your own gain. And, you believe, hey, my company can grow, but I can help them grow their company too. And that takes a certain type of person to have that abundance, mentality for sure. I recently did that with a new business that I spun off in this year. It's called My Fit Pod. And it was, even though I have Honor Yoga, it's because I saw the individual curator, the individual fitness and wellness professional, the individual yogi, who really wanted to not just teach for a studio, but to be out there live streaming and doing things on their own, elevating them. And I built that business as a passion. So it's really interesting how you took that route of, hey, and it is a route of abundance mentality that you have. I think that's so admirable. Good for you.
Yeah. So I think it's like one of those things that it's a shift. And like one thing in Morocco that the country teaches us all the time is you can't force anything. They have a word, inshallah, if God wills, like if the higher power wills it to happen, it will. So I sort of see this shift happening where, I started the business as a way to serve, to connect Western women to artists and crafts. So if there are other ways to buy things, I'm sort of riding with that wave, like, okay, maybe I have a new role as a consultant, And it's funny, so I'm working with a couple different companies, an NGO, Care International has projects in Morocco, and it's women's economic empowerment. So they've hired me as a consultant to coach women. So that's sort of a new spin-off of Mushmina that I've been doing this year. But I'm sort of just going with that flow of the river, not fighting it and saying, okay, maybe it's time that I like shift, somewhat.
Yeah, right. That sounds amazing. That's a good philosophy. We're using the word flow in many different ways today. Mushmina, what's the name mean? What's behind the name?
So people think it's an Arabic word. It's not. it was a funny nickname that I called my sister as a kid. So when we started the business together 12 years ago, we were trying to think of business names, and we thought of Mushmina, and it's like Ashgash Bagash, like there's no real meaning. So it's a made up word. So there's no Google competition. So we went with Mushmina, and it really works because to us, it meant like a sisterhood, a global sisterhood. And the word to me means little sister, and Moroccans kind of go like, oh, it really does sound like it could be an Arabic word. So it worked for us also.
I love it. Talk a little bit more about the women that you work with and that make the products, and talk a little bit about the products that you've created over the years.
This is one of our postcards. So, we're accessories designers. So we do robes, bags. I'll show you. I have a bright yellow clutch. This is a cosmetic clutch. And we sort of became known for our fabrics. Moroccan upholstery fabrics are really vibrant. So the first product we made were bags out of the upholstery fabrics, not very dissimilar to this clutch that I'm still making today. So sort of our claim to fame is this Moroccan upholstery fabric in bags. And we've sold them to National Geographic. My sister was on QVC a couple times. So, that sort of was what the brand became known for. But we also do clothing more recently and accessories. And it's all made, preserving artists and crafts. So we use traditional beads and different techniques that, embroidery that's traditional to Morocco. So we try to incorporate from many different regions of the country, like what each region does best. So like leather from Marrakesh, the embroidery comes from near Fez. So it's really an artisan, bespoke boutique brand is how I would describe it.
That's amazing. Your biggest customer, U.S. customers?
We're mostly U.S. and I'd like to expand to Europe because of the proximity of Morocco. New shipping solutions just opened, like FedEx. FedEx is shipping from rural Morocco, where I am, to California in less than a week. I think they've got USPS beat right now. Yeah. So none of that existed even a year ago. So I've seen shifts in the market where most of I'd say 90% of our market is US right now, but I'm looking at Europe, as ways to expand. And then we also have a nice customer base in Morocco. There are a lot of expats here, a lot of international women, and they like our brand because it's sort of modern Morocco. It's a kaftan, but it has like a modern spin on it. So that's our look. Yeah.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit more about your sister, little sister, big sister. You're in business with her?
Yeah. So we've been in business for 12 years together. We started this together. And people would joke, they say, how is it to work with your sister? But we would say, well, we live on different continents, so it works. She was always based outside of Philadelphia. So Katie ran our retail shops. We had a shop on South Street in Philadelphia for a couple of years. And then we were out in the suburbs in Wayne, PA, sort of a bigger, more expanded space. And then Katie really has her finger on the pulse. She's had the vision, that brick and mortar boutique stores are sort of like a downtrend in the US. People are shopping online. So this is pre-COVID. And she decided, our lease was up. Maybe we should close the store and just focus on doing online sales and pop-ups. So we did that just the year before COVID. So we were really happy that we didn't have all the overhead that we used to at the time. So
such a smart decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how have your supply chain issues been? None, right? Because you're sourcing where you are and you're shipping internationally. You haven't had the challenges that many people have had here in the US, I would imagine, during
that's true. Yeah, yes and no. Like everything's sourced locally, the wool, the weavers. But during lockdown, like Morocco was in a severe lockdown. You couldn't travel between cities. Like it was pretty intense. So we had wholesale orders at the time that were still going. So we had a problem trying to get the raw materials from one city to the next. But the women were really creative about it. Like if you had a doctor's note, you could travel. So they did stuff like that. So, I have to say Moroccan women are so resourceful. We found a way, and our biggest wholesale customer placed a really nice order through 2020 that kept the women working for almost a year. So I'm grateful for business like that. another women-led company as well. So
yes, all of our listeners listening, definitely support, right? It's great
yeah.
business to support. So, you talked a little bit about the culture of flow there, Morocco, but I love I love your answer of what you've learned, from the Western culture and how maybe we here in the US, we tend to grip. I call it gripping to things. Can you talk a little bit about, what you've learned from the culture and really how that applies to, it is a yoga practice essentially, right? And, your view of yoga.
Hey, everyone should come to Morocco and have an experience in surrender. Honestly, it's a surrender. It's letting go, that grip that you mentioned. This country will show it to you. And it's like, I don't know if Morocco is on a ley line spiritually or something, but I always felt very spiritually connected here. People are very religious, so they pray 5 times a day. So there's that element going on. And the history of the country. I think they're spiritually driven people, so like, let's say, okay, I was supposed to be in New York today. It didn't happen, and Moroccans, the response would be miktub. Miktub in Arabic means it was written. It means it wasn't meant to be, and they just released it. And I've really learned that lesson over and over. In the first couple of years, I think, of living here, it's a hard lesson to learn. In the West, we fight it, we grip. And here they surrender. And I see it. My husband's Moroccan, and he has that real, like, live in faith kind of attitude, like it's not meant to be. And I think I learned that a lot from the people around me, and it's so true, so before I learned that lesson, it's like swimming upriver, and you have to just surrender. If something's not working, just let it go, really. And Morocco teaches you that big time. So if you want to bring a yoga retreat here, and we can practice that surrender.
I'm gonna book it in my calendar right now.
Maria, how can we bring yoga to rural Morocco? This is my question for you.
We're gonna definitely talk about that, and we'll talk to Tracy about that too. So
I want to put her in charge of the Morocco yoga retreat.
Here you go. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. We do grip here in the U.S. and, my family is Italian and I go to Italy every 2 years and I want to cry whenever I come back because, it's that environment of just love, and we're not always just working for the next thing and the next thing in the future. We're in the moment more. And, and I love how you talk too about like your socialized medicine and how you've had your children in Morocco. And I can't wait for you to tell us about it. And I'll tell you why. When I read it, I was like, oh my God, that sounds like my story. So I had I have 2 daughters. I had my first daughter here in a hospital, and they gave me Pitocin to try to speed up the birth. And because it is a business in the US, giving birth is a business and C-sections are a business. And I almost had a C-section, but I didn't. And I remember with my second daughter, I did it completely different. I hired a midwife. I had her at home in a birthing pool with 16 of my closest family and friends. And it was the most empowering experience of my life. But I never forget, I called the insurance company, Heather, and it's similar to, kind of what the point you're going to make and you're going to tell us about. And they were like, yeah, no, if you have the baby in the hospital, it's $32,000. And if you have the baby at home, it's $16,000, but we're not going to cover it. I'm like, what? Why? I'm saving you $16,000. Why would you not cover my birth? I have a licensed doctor and a professional team, and it was very interesting. So it was kind of a real eye opener to your point, right? Of like, our medical and our system here in the US. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience, because it sounds like it was probably very similar.
Well, I'm not, Morocco, the healthcare is okay, but in a pandemic, we're seeing the challenges of being in a developing country. That's why the government closed the borders, because they just are not equipped to handle. Sure. Yeah, but so that aside, having two kids here, I'm an entrepreneur based in Morocco. I don't have U.S. health insurance. And that was it. Like my C-section for my daughter was, what's the word? She didn't flip.
Yeah.
Forgetting the English word, but she was breech. So I couldn't take the risk to be billed like $60,000 for a C-section. So I had her here for $750 in a private Moroccan clinic, 2 nights in a private room. And I said, what is messed up in the U.S. system that it's outrageously expensive, the insurance company is getting involved, et cetera. That said, I mean, it was definitely an interesting experience, having my first baby. My mother wasn't here because she came early, and so not having the family support was sort of tough. So I don't know if I'd recommend coming to Morocco for a medical vacation, but people do that, because healthcare is a lot less expensive in other countries. But Morocco was able to vaccinate most of the population right now. So that was good, but there are definite other challenges. So, I think as an American living abroad, I feel like we do have the best of both worlds. I see the best in each country and where it needs to be improved. So
that's a really great point, which is really a yoga practice, right? There is no judgment. There's no right or wrong. It's just yin and yang, right? It's this yin and the yang. And then somewhere between the yin and the yang, there's balance. So speaking of yoga, what does yoga mean to you?
Yoga to me is peace, really. It's an hour of self-care, or an hour and a half, however long you take a class. And honestly, I really miss that in my life. Like, I have 2 toddlers. Life is so busy, and today I went and got a massage. Self-care for women is so important. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a yoga center like Honor Yoga, it's not just the class, it's the environment and showing up to practice self-care. Like, that's what yoga to me means, self-care, and to carve the time out of my schedule to do that is so rare these days in my life. But I recognize, even having this conversation with you, I recognize this is self-care, talking to other entrepreneurs about our struggles, our triumphs. I think that women need to do that more. And a friend of mine in Casablanca, her daughter is like a prenatal specialist. She opened a center for women. It's a birthing center, but she does. Have you ever heard of this, Marie? It's called Closing of the Bones. Have you heard of this? Mm-mm. So this is so amazing to me. After you have a baby, they do this practice, and in olden days in Morocco, they did it in the hammam, in the public bath, where the hammam, the woman that scrubs you, they do this thing where they wrap your abdomen, they wrap your waist to close your bones after you've given birth. So it's sort of a spiritual procedure that they did. And my husband's grandmother, oh yeah, it's something that they used to do. But my friend's daughter opened this center where they're offering that again in a massage room, and looking at old traditional techniques that women did and women shared with each other that we've sort of forgotten, in modern times, our ancestors and the history of how women took care of each other after giving birth. And so I think, and this is really progressive in Casablanca. She offers yoga and Pilates. So I think, it's something that we need to pay attention to. Self-care.
I love that. It just got the goosebumps. That's a pretty, that's really amazing. Yeah, there is this process of empowerment, when you give birth, and to be able to incorporate that with self-care and support. It just sounds so amazing, so amazing. So you talk a little bit about this thing. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but is it Rizik? Rizik, similar to Dharma. So in yoga, we say, Dharma, your purpose, I love how you talked about earlier, how you made a time capsule when you were little. And then the time capsule, you said you wanted to be, a designer, and woof, here you are, right? Living your Dharma, being a designer and helping women. I think that's so amazing. So what is this? Is it Rizik?
Rizik. Yeah, it's an Arabic word. And it's sort of, it's along the same lines of Miktub again, like it was meant to be. So when people like, they say to me, oh, you're an American and you ended up in a more rural area, even where we live right now. I live about an hour outside of Casablanca, so it's closer to where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I'm the only American in the whole town, so I'm sort of living definitely off the beaten path. And people go, oh, it's your Rizik. Like it means it's your Dharma, like Morocco called me here. And I know I talked a little bit about really my life's purpose. Like when I'm training rural women, I feel most connected spiritually to like my path and what my mission is. And, and some days I'm like we all do, we just show up and do the best you can that day. And I feel like I'm really supposed to help women in that way, and some of the communities I work with are so rural. I mean, really, you can't imagine, Morocco is such a vast and beautiful country. And, it's still a developing country. So there's still areas where people don't have access to markets to sell. And I mean, so like I said, the internet's changed everything. So if they can acquire skills to like learn how to make products that will sell and then connect to these internet platforms to help them sell, I mean, it's been the biggest game changer. Women in rural Morocco on Instagram, like that has been the last 5 years. So
it's beautiful. That is just so beautiful. And you're right. You feel like you're your authentic self, and you feel like you're not working a day in your life because you just love what you do.
Yeah, and I love the off-road drives. Like I drive hours and hours, like off the beaten path. My friends in Morocco think it's sort of crazy where I drive in a day. And because we live in the middle of the country, it's like a 3-hour drive to get anywhere, but it's a beautiful drive. If you go to our Instagram too, there are pictures. Sometimes I take video of some of those trips. So they're really my most favorite thing to do is doing that kind of like workshop training with women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. You got, so your website is mushmina.com, mushmina.com. Is that correct? Right. Great.
Do you want me to show you some of the products real quick?
Yes, absolutely. Show us and talk us through it.
Okay, we're in my studio, which is connected to my house. It's 8:30 at night. So this is like this live-work balance that we have in Morocco. My kids come to meetings with me. All the artisans know my family and I know theirs. It's great. Sometimes like I have to shut my door but the work never ends, but I'm able to do it from home in the studio. And we're really a cottage industry business. So most of the work is done in women's homes. I had a workshop for a couple of years with sewing machines, et cetera. And in the end, we closed it because they prefer to work at home in the same way that I do now. So I can understand it. So here, these are woven totes. So this is like an overwashed, hand-woven tote bag that's made in rural Morocco, finished in Casablanca. So the finishing is top-notch, but they're all made with, hand-woven products. These are our newest jackets. They're really wild. This is like a burgundy, wild upholstery fabric. I'll show you. This is a kaftan, great for yoga. So these are all rayon. And the fabrics are actually upcycled. So a lot of the fabrics that come into Morocco are remnants from Europe, from some big brands. Zara remnants sometimes show up. And we make limited run, clothing, limited production from those remnants. So this is a robe. And it's all very colorful with hand finishing, hand stitching, finishing. So that, that's really what we seek to do is employ and empower women and preserve the traditional craft of Morocco.
That's wonderful. And that there's energy, right? When you wear that, I can't wait to go shopping. You're wearing energy of, women who've put their love and their spirit into the fabric, and that's transient. And that's a beautiful thing. I love it. Last question for you, Heather. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be? What would it say? And what would it represent?
Good question. I think something related to handmade, like we were just talking about. It's the opposite of fast fashion. It's limited production. It's being conscious about what we buy and what we wear and who it employed and where it came from. It would say something like that, and it's funny, in college, I went to the School of Visual Arts, my undergrad, and one of the classes was advertising for social change. So we had questions like that, what does success mean to you? And success always to me meant freedom, and being an entrepreneur and designing my life and my business and my schedule has always felt very freeing to me. So anyway, I think my billboard would be like a social mission billboard, buy handmade, think about what you're buying and why and who it impacts.
That's right.
I don't even think I would try to sell you a kaftan, just the message.
Right, just the message, right. Buy local, source local, support local, and the people and the energy and the love behind it. I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and women in business too. I really, I feel like we've come a long way. I'm a big fan of Tory Burch and the Tory Burch Foundation. She's done a lot. Like, she's been involved with our business a lot, inviting us to events to sell. And I just think that really more women, getting angel funding and investment. I think we still have a long way to come to help scale our businesses. So I've seen a lot of progress, but I also feel like there's still a long way to come, especially in Morocco. This is still a very patriarchal society. So, I've seen a lot of progress, but that's a whole other conversation.
It is. And we have a lot of work to do. And I'm going to be interviewing in 2022 women founders and companies that support women founder and minority founders. And that's my dharma in 2022. So Heather, thank you for inspiring women everywhere and for empowering, women in Morocco and really being the leader, and as they say, be the change that you wish to see in the world. You are a yogi, and we are grateful to you for your service and your inspiration.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, we all need to uplift and empower each other.
Tell everybody your website one more time, and everyone go shopping. Support these wonderful. Mushmina.
Mushmina. There you go. Check it out.